Welcome to People First by All Voices. I am your host, Jeffrey Fermin, and I'm joined today by Marion. We were talking
Marion.
about this earlier, American enunciations versus Spanish ones. So let's clear up. In America, we would say Marion Anderson. I'm
Yeah.
gonna now pivot over to you, let you introduce yourself, and use whatever accent you may.
Oh, well, I only have a Scottish accent, so it's Marion in Scottish brogue, but when I say that in the US, most people think I'm saying Maddie for some reasons. Starbucks is always a wild ride. You never know what you're going to get in Starbucks. But Marion with an American twang.
When when they write down your name on these like Starbucks cups, what misspellings have you seen on there? Like, have they just completely missed the mark entirely? Are they like putting weird numbers, letters in there?
Yeah, when I lived in the Middle East, I used to live in the Middle East and I used to get Miriam a lot. But the weirdest one I got was Madian, so Maddion, which just threw me for a loop. But I thought it was hilarious. So that got posted on Instagram immediately.
Amazing. And yeah, Marion and I are going to discuss something that's actually it's one of the core things that we tried to solve here at All Voices. Creating psychologically safe workplaces.
Mm.
Our founder Claire was very big on that. You can read her story in the About Us section on All Voices, but let's get down to the nitty gritty. I'm going to start off with a dumb question because I myself don't come from an HR background. I know of HR things just mostly because I've been in the space for quite some time, but I'm
Mm.
curious to hear like what is psychological safety or psychologically safe workplaces?
Oh, it's the Holy Grail, my friend. The Holy Grail. Oh, we have a cat joining us.
And there's
Yeah.
nothing that can create a safer workplace than a cat.
Exactly. Is he making a guest appearance? So, psychological safety is a phrase that was coined by Amy Emerson. She's a professor at Harvard and research that she did in the 90s. And that research was kind of built on earlier research by Kahn and Bennis and Shane and various other people. But basically, it's the notion of that you can be at work, that you can ask questions, you can give feedback, you can make mistakes, you can basically fuck up, right? And you're not going to get negative blowback for that because you're in a space which makes you feel safe, right? And when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, we're more likely to try new things, we're more likely to innovate. And when we take risks and when we innovate, guess what? We make money. So there's a real ROI there. It's definitely not a woke language that some people kind of try to make it out to be, but it really just common sense. Treat your people well, give them a space where they can, feel freedom to do any of those things, and you're going to have a happy workforce and you're going to make money. That simple.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce your cat while he or she's there? I guess like why not?
And Izzy. Yep. Oh no, now she's going to leave, but that's Izzy. So she's
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say like whenever I'm in the middle of meetings, I have two cats of my own. They just like kind of jump on and they like the second I click, hey, start the Zoom call or start a Google Meet, they're just like right here. They're on me, and my coworkers make fun of me all the time.
Guaranteed. Or it's when you're in the middle of a really important meeting and one jumps on your head and you're just like, oh, come on, like.
Yeah. I used to get very nervous about like having them around when like I'm recording these things, mostly because every now and then they'll fight. But now I'm just like, all right, well, we'll make it a part of the show and the experience.
She's back.
Keep her on there the whole rest of this. So yeah, I was gonna ask. I feel like a lot of the things that you just touched upon with a psychologically safe workplace, does it feed into having engaged employees? I feel like there's been this like employee engagement crisis since 2010s when we had the rise of big data in the HR tech world, and we're starting to figure out that only 10% of employees are actively engaged, right? Like that really hasn't changed much, and can creating more psychologically safe environments maybe make a difference there?
100%. It's, again, psychological safety, it's not like a destination, right? Everyone kind of thinks about it as I have to reach this point of psychological safety, but it's not. It's about creating an environment. So it's a journey. It's not a destination. And, You only have to look at anything published by Korn Ferry or Gartner or any of these guys that show that engagement has been not just leveling, but it's been on a downward spiral, and most so in the last 2 years, right? And you look at the external environment right now, and you look at what's happening in the job market, people don't feel safe. I read an article the other day that, in tech, so far this year, there's been more than 200,000 layoffs in the US in the tech space. That is absolutely terrifying. So that doesn't make people feel safe or engaged. And when we go back to the days of COVID and that sort of mid-pandemic, the notion of quiet quitting, that's what's happening right now. And the name for it changes constantly, right? It's quiet quitting one week, it's something else the next week, but it's basically the same thing. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to keep my head down, I'm not going to take risks, I'm not going to shout out if I see something that could be a problem, because I need to pay my mortgage and I need to keep food on the table. I've got kids to pay for. So I'm just going to stay here, be quiet, do what's asked of me, and I'm not going to make any noise, right? That's not engagement, and that's not retention. That's people staying out of necessity. And as soon as the market shifts, which it will eventually, are they going to stay? Unlikely.
Yeah.
Mm.
I read an article recently that was around, I forgot the phrase that they use, but it's essentially employees that have been affected by return to office mandates.
Mm-hmm.
They're It's a really funny phrase, but they just kind of go in, clock in, get their free coffee, hang around, lounge in the office, and then 5 p.m. they barely get anything done. They participate in the theatrics of looking and going to work, and then they head out. Do you feel like
Absolutely.
is that another one of these situations?
It's just a variation of the same, right? So I'm finishing my PhD right now. My PhD research is all about the intersection of how companies approach return to office or hybrid remote work and how that impacts the employee sense of psychological safety, right? Spoiler alert, guess what the hypothesis was? It was like, if you force people, if you mandate people to do something that they really don't want to do, guess what? They're not going to be interested in working. They're going to do the bare minimum. Go back to what I said a minute ago. It's exacerbated by what's happening in the external environment right now. Yes, exactly what you're talking about. That is the reality in offices all over the world, not even just the US.
And I guess I want to tie this back to some of the things that All Voices does. And now we're entering that like drastic territory of psychologically safe environments where certain situations could make certain people feel not necessarily welcome in the workplace. Do you feel like having systems set in place like an employee relations platform? Let's give two different examples here. One that's more of a, I guess, like a conflict resolution type of idea versus an employee engagement solution. So I look at like a system like an All Voices, a whatever you want to call it, employee relations platform, a ethics hotline, all that fun stuff. What role does that play in creating psychologically safe environments? And also, does a system like an employee engagement, a pulse survey, some tool like that also have that kind of effect? I could have phrased that way better, but just giving you
No,
two different examples.
I get the gist. That is a lot to unpack, my friend, right? So let's start with the employee voice side, right? Employee voice is so important, whether it's, a pulse survey, a quarterly survey, and even an annual survey. Not a fan of annual surveys because, I mean, why are we looking at data from last year? But it's better than nothing, right? It's better than nothing. But the surveys are only worth anything if the employer's actually going to do something about it, right? If they're gonna, really look at the data that's coming back, that they're really gonna transparently discuss the results and have an action plan. And when they can't do something or they won't do something, don't ignore it. Don't brush it under the carpet, but actually talk about it, right? Because transparency and trust is a huge factor in how that supports, again, the employee sense of psychological safety and their engagement and their motivation and retention and all of the things, right? So employee voice is so important. End of. The other tools like for employee relations, huge fan of that. Again, I think that when a company shows that they really pay attention to those types of details, it helps build confidence with employees. It helps demonstrate that they really take this stuff seriously. But it only demonstrates that they're taking it seriously if they're really using the tools to the full effect and there's real utilization and promotion there. If it's just, we have this tool, it's great, but no one really uses it and we never talk about it, then it's just another performative action. And tools are only as good as the people that are using it and that are presenting them, right? So again, go back to transparency and trust. If your leadership team are transparent, that builds trust. And so if it builds trust, it builds psychological safety. And if you have psychological safety, people are more likely to engage in those types of processes. So I think that they're all very much interlinked. The one thing this is adjacent to all of that, but I think the one thing that employees can feel is overwhelmed by the amount of tech that we do use for things, right? We have tech fatigue because we have employee satisfaction, we have, employee relations, we have our HRIS, we have our L&D, we have this, we have that. And I think that starts to become overwhelming, but, that's very much champagne problems, right? But it's true. It does impact how employees feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We use that phrase a lot over here, champagne problems. I just love the fact that you busted that one out. Yeah. So also a little note. I think Marion did a great job of saying, use our tool, use our system and promote it within, promote it within your organization. Make sure people are being proactive and, addressing any issues.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm just freestyling from here. Anything else that you feel like should be known about creating psychologically safe environments?
Oh gosh. So in my years of being a practitioner and, all of the research that I do, right? I keep coming back to the same core themes. Like if you look at engagement surveys, you look at employee sentiment, when you do any kind of form of thematic analysis, the root of every single thing, I think, that's presented back by employees, it comes back to three things, and I've touched on them. So leadership, transparency, and trust, right? Psychological safety. But the other thing is manager capability and enablement. I'm very passionate about the plight of the middle manager. I think that particularly in tech, which is very much my world, when you're in high growth organizations, high growth environments, quite often these junior managers have had very little runway to prepare and so they can go from being an IC to being a manager of people practically overnight, right? And without, the proper competency frameworks and the support and again, that runway, they're just winging it a lot of the time. And that definitely inhibits, again, that sense of psychological safety, because psychological safety, a big factor of that is the strength of relationship, the rapport, the trust, the communication. And I think that, that can be something, we're not necessarily born with that. It's something a lot of us have maybe innately, but it's something that we develop over time and we certainly learn from positive role models. And so I think that, to support organizations that are really serious about psychological safety, do not underestimate the necessity of how you develop your leaders, how you develop your managers, how you set them up for success way before they get the title of manager. But they should be learning those competencies and understanding them and being able to speak that language well in advance. So by the time they are promoted into those roles, they're already hitting the ground running. Because if they don't have that level of comfortability, it's the people that they're managing that will suffer. And again, when they suffer, that's when psychological safety becomes damaged. And, if you link that to the notion of psychological contract, right? So psychological contract is, I work for Jeffrey. Jeffrey pays me a salary, and that's our contract. I work hard for you, you pay me money, right? But say, for example, you're not giving me career conversations, or I get passed over for promotion, or you rate me as successful, but I only get a 1% pay increase, or all of these things, right? That damages my psychological contract. Think of psychological contract as like I use the analogy of a windshield. Sorry, the dogs are going bananas. I use the analogy of a windshield, right? You get a brand new car and you've got this windshield and it's intact and it's pristine and it's great, right? When you start a new job, that's your psychological contract. It's pristine, it's intact, it's golden, everything's good. But then a few months in, something happens. Maybe you have a really bad interaction with a leader, or again, you know, you're not included, or your ADA accommodations are not being responded to, whatever it might be. It's like getting a ding in your windshield. You know, when you get a tiny pebble and it hits your windshield, and it's not bad enough to crack it, but you can just see the smallest little chip, right? But then a few months later, something else happens. You know, maybe, your manager passes you over for promotion, or, whatever it might be, right? That chip gets bigger. And then before you know it, it cracks. And over a period of time, the crack gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And there comes a point where the crack is so bad, it's not repairable. You can't fix it. And it's like that with psychological contract. If the company's chipping away at my windshield, right, by not giving me the things that I need to feel psychologically safe, there'll come a point where I'm just so beyond giving a crap anymore, and peace out. And I'm looking for another job. And that is the end of psychological contract, because you can't repair it. All you can do is get a new windshield, right? So when you relate that back to psychological safety and then the capability and enablement of managers, it's really critical, because every single thing that the managers do can cause and worsen that ding to the psychological contract. Does that make sense?
Makes ton of sense. I love analogies. Now I'm gonna take that back to all the folks that I speak with. Like, essentially, employee retention is like maintaining a car. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you're on top of it, or else it's just gonna completely go to crap.
That's it. And it's expensive, right? Think of the cost of, I hate the phrase human capital, but think of the cost. To hire someone is really expensive, right? Especially if you're looking at recruiters and relocations and sign-in bonuses and salaries and RSUs and all of the things. It's really damn expensive. And so to treat people as that like they're disposable, well, that's not cost effective, right? And also it damages your reputation. People don't want to see you as an employer of choice. So, again, to your point, keep that car pristine, right? Get it serviced, get it cleaned, make sure it's vacuumed, give it a good wax every now and again. Like, keep it really in good shape, and that car is going to last you for years. It's exactly the same principle with employees.
Amazing. So, getting your PhD, you hinted at a hypothesis that you may have. You want to give us a little sneak peek, or are you allowed to give us a sneak peek on what you're working on? Or
Honestly, it's not rocket science, right? It's pretty simple. Let me dial it back a second. So when I went back to school to do my PhD, it was right at the beginning of early COVID, because I realised maybe about 6 months into COVID that if I didn't find something else to do, I was going to become an alcoholic, right? Because I was just drinking wine, because I was by myself, I was at home, and I'm like, okay, I'll just drink wine and watch Netflix. And I was running out of things to watch and I was drinking all the wine. So I thought, okay, I need to do something else. And I went back to school part-time. And a little bit further along that journey is when Elon Musk bought Twitter. And I'm not an Elon fan, but I do find him pretty fascinating to observe as a leader, right? But when he bought Twitter, his whole ethos was, I don't care that you've all had beanbags and pizza Fridays and you've all worked from home up until this point. I don't give a crap about that. Either get your ass in the office 40 hours a week, or I will assume that you're resigning, right? And I thought, whoa, like, this is tech. Tech thrives on innovation. It thrives on creativity. Is that going to make employees feel psychologically safe, right? No, it's not, because they're feeling threatened. They're feeling like bullied effectively. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing to research. But I don't think it takes a doctorate to figure out that, human nature is pretty straightforward. If I've been able to do something that works for me and suits me and gives me an optimum working condition, and then my company mandate me to do something completely different to that, which doesn't support inclusion. It doesn't support my ability to be flexible. It doesn't support the complex lives that we have today. If my employer says you need to be in 5 days a week, 8 to 5, no ifs, no buts. After I've had all of that freedom, it's human nature to go, well, that's shit. I'm not down for that. And I go back to what you said earlier on. The impact of that are employees that are just rolling up, collecting the paycheck, doing the bare minimum, and then, always looking over their shoulder for when they can exit. So
Promise this will be the last thing, but you touched on something pretty interesting right now. I for one cannot do a 9 to 5. I love the tech scene because of the just creativity and innovation required to be a part of it, especially in the startup world where you always have to be on your toes, right? I feel like a job like mine here at All Voices, they give me enough flexibility to, pursue different initiatives like this, talk to industry leaders, talk to folks that are doing interesting stuff. And sometimes my best work doesn't necessarily come from 8 to 5. Like, just last night I was testing out different creative assets at like 10 at night. I just had a whole creative spurt. But do you feel like that is a good way of letting your employees kind of be free? Not, maybe going more for the results oriented type of vibe than saying like you have to be here 40 hours in front of a desk and be a robot, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a loaded question, right? Because if I'm in a customer facing role, or if I'm a doctor or a nurse, like I don't have that. I have to be there when they need me there, right? So there's that whole section of society that don't have that same option or choice, right? Although to that point, interestingly, there was a study done, I forget the name of the researcher, but there was a study done somewhere late COVID about nurses who were feeling burnt out from COVID, quite, understandably. And they were actually trialing, I forget where it was, it might have been the UK, I can't remember, but they were trialing hybrid working for nurses. So they would maybe have 3 days on, in ward on shift, and then 2 days at home doing case notes and, and professional development and stuff like that. And, that had some really compelling results. But go back to tech, right? Or go back to any kind of knowledge-based career. It's not about remote and it's not about hybrid. It's about flexibility. Because we all have different rhythms and different needs, right? You like to tinker about on tech at 10 o'clock at night. I'm usually asleep by 10 o'clock at night because I'm absolutely knackered. But 6 a.m, I'm bright as a button, and quite often a lot of my thesis work I'll do early before I start my workday, right? I'm also disabled, so I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos. It means my joints are pretty dodgy and they pop in and out, and it causes me a lot of pain, right? So there's days where I either can't get up off the floor, or I need to be icing, or I need to take some really heavy painkillers. So I can't drive when I'm popping, painkillers. So I have to work at home. So when we think about the need for flexibility, it supports inclusion. We saw during COVID a huge uptick in the number of disabled folks, carers, parents being able to return to the workforce because of the nature of the flexibility. The fact that organisations are, for whatever reason, going against the research and turning their back on that, they're only limiting their talent pool. Because again, not everyone can do 9 to 5. And I think this is a friend of mine who I do some work with, Deb Has, she calls it the last gasp, right, of the current regime. And I think she's right. The future of work will be much more human centric. And we know that because, again, human driven, tech powered, right? We see that happening. So I think that things will shift. I think that where we are today has a breaking point. And I think that Gen Z and our younger generations that are coming through are not going to tolerate the same crap that previous generations have.
Amazing. Yeah. And I just had somebody, by the way, I had Danielle Faraj, who is a Gen Z specialist earlier on the podcast. And we're going to air that one probably before this one. So we'll split it up. But very interesting points with there. Maybe I'll connect to you guys and maybe, who knows, maybe we all do some content together one day.
Sounds fine. I'd love that. I'm always up for that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, Mary. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. And If I make it to Scotland, I don't know if this is in the entry point of the pod. I'm keeping all this stuff on here. If it's in the intro, we'll keep it. But if I make it out to Scotland in December, I'll definitely give you a shout. We'll make it work. And who knows? If we want, we'll create some content out there. I don't know. We'll just have fun. Most important, we'll have some wine. We'll relax.
Well,
And yeah, we'll
I
smoke
wish
it
I
out.
was in Scotland, but I'm in Arkansas randomly. So yeah, I live in Northwest Arkansas. But yeah,
Whoa, for real?
yeah. I'm an implant.
Okay, this whole time I thought you were out in Scotland.
No, I haven't lived there for, gosh, I moved to the US 6 years ago, and then I've ping-ponged around the world, and then gone back, lived in Scotland in between. But I'm never going to lose my accent. I am proud to be Scottish, and I'll never develop a American twang unless I'm having to say my name to people in Starbucks, because that's the only time.
Amazing. Well, if I ever make it out to Arkansas,
Hmm.
I'll definitely give you a shout and we'll make it work. Uh,
Fabulous.
Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to air this one. I'll be in touch, okay? Every time.
Awesome. Thanks.